If you look closely on this application screen, you could identify some of the tasks that the user can perform. I can, for example, change the quantity on this order line. If I want to order 6 plates or 5 plates of pierogi, that's where I perform this task, changing quantity. If I know a promotion code that gives me a discount, I can apply this code here. So there's the second task. Finally, when we've reviewed the order and maybe applied the code, there's a place order which finalizes this order. That's the last task that you could perform here. Now, the problem with this UI is whenever I change the quantity or apply code, all of these parameters are sent and handled in this update controller action. We know that a task on the UI can be related, and usually is related, to the command on the backend side of the application. A command expresses an intent of a user. And so these tasks on UI. If I want to change the quantity, I operate on this area. If I want to apply a discount code, I perform this task here. Let's focus on one of these tasks, that is applying a code, and see if we could extract it. How far can we go? If we reach the end state of having a command, we already know how to proceed with commands on a backend side. So to begin with, we have an order, and there are two methods that help us so far update this active record. That was the rebuild lines, which, by the way, didn't mention anything about changing quantity. So it wasn't that clear in the code that changing quantity happens here. Then the second one is the apply code. There's some logic of applying a code, what is a valid code, and what's the related discount. Then in case of the invalid code, we add an errors. That's one implementation of that code logic. What we do to separate this task on the UI, first let's add new controller action. Let's call it apply code, and move related code to handle applying codes. At the end, we want to redirect to the action we started from, which is order edit orders path, obviously. We would need to add this action to the routing. And let's have a look at the view that powers this screen. At the moment, this is one big form. And there was the apply code submit. The second submit happened when we selected the quantity on the onChange handler of the dropdown. What we're going to do now is we'll be splitting this form into two separate ones. And the second form, we intend to post it to the action apply code, and the method will be post. Let's refresh screen and check whether changing quantity works. Let's check passing an invalid code. And there's no error where previously there was one. So there's one more change. We need to transfer errors that occurred in this action. And that can be achieved by passing it through the flash mechanism. And we always expect to render an error of errors, because flash error can be nil. When there are no errors, let's wrap it in a kernel array, which makes an empty array of a nil. Then let's refresh the screen, and so far so good. The functionality we had works, but now the apply code is a separate submit. Now let's have a command. One way of implementing commands is by using dry RB libraries. I prefer this method, but in reality it doesn't matter which way of implementing commands you choose. Let's see an example. We would name this command apply code. That reminds us the intent of the user. With dry-rb, I could say that we expect to have a promo code attribute, and that this attribute is a string, and I can further say that the string must be not empty. Let's see how that works. Apply code, does it work? Constraint, I think it was. Constraint. Yeah, so we have apply code. We could say that the promo code is 1.1. That works. For empty promo code, we would get command invalid error. And for non-strings, we would get an error as well, which is a good thing. A command is can be seen as a boundary to our system, and we don't want to introduce invalid values into the system. Controllers take parameters from the browser, in general from the outside world, so it's a good place to validate those parameters and make sure that only something we consider valid goes further. I mentioned that you could implement commands differently. In one case, that could have been without any library, in plain Ruby, something like this. Let's initialize it with promo code. Let's raise argument error unless it is a string. Let's raise argument error if promo code is empty. And finally, let's assign it what we've passed in initializer and let's make it accessible. So this could be an example of a command implementation that doesn't involve any external libraries. The implementation I'm using with dry struct and the dry types can be seen in a sample application. It's not much code, but obviously I'm reusing much of the code from the library. Let's go back to the controller and let's produce the command, which is apply code. By the way, when we have attributes validation in commands, we no longer need to rely on strong parameters. This mechanism becomes kind of redundant. So we will be applying promo code that at this point we expect to be valid. But we also know that anyone can submit invalid. Anyone can submit invalid promo code. Therefore, we'll be rescuing for command invalid error. And in that case, we would be providing our own error. Let's say at this point, invalid code. An interesting error coming from the fact that order promo code. An interesting fact. When I was showing you the alternative implementation, my mind already switched to the different shape of the initializer. In dry driven commands, we pass hash, kind of a hash into an initializer. Yeah. And there's the second thing we need to change. When there's an error, because we've passed invalid promo code, we won't get to the point of assigning instance variable of the order. So either we change that or remind ourselves that passing an instance of the active record is just a convenience. What URL helper really needs is an ID of the record. So let's say we will replace that. By the way, we still need that instance. Let's load it a bit further. We won't be rendering any view, so let's make it normal local variable. And there's the order ID as well. Okay, invalid code, invalid code. So far, so good. What we have achieved right now. we identified a task on the UI. We've made a connection with that task on the UI and a command on the backend, which is apply code. There's a single controller action that is responsible for this task. What we could do is we could take it further to the different controller, maybe a single action controller that is interested in handling just this one command. If we have a command, we could then pair it with a command handler that would further load the aggregate. Maybe it would be no longer an active record model. We will have an aggregate that is related just to the coupon code, to the discount code logic.